With all the success you've had, do you still face, are you currently facing any fears, or are there fears about the horizon?
Man, I have to give you amazing props. You're such a curious person about the people that you talk to. I love it. I love it, man.
Thank you.
The answer is, thank you. Are you kidding me? I've been on a ton of podcasts and people just same questions.
Welcome to Idea Climbing Radio. Today we're with John David Mann, who is an award-winning author. His books have sold over 3 million copies in 36 languages, including the New York Times bestselling memoir, The Red Circle, with former Navy SEAL Brandon Webb, and the New York Times bestselling parable, The Latte Factor, with personal finance legend David Bach. His classic, The Go-Giver, with Bob Burg, won the Living Now Evergreen Medal for its contribution to positive global change. And he resides in Florida and New England, where he leads a coaching program called Writing Mastery Mentorship. You're a busy man. Thank you for being here, John. I appreciate it.
You're kidding? It's my pleasure. You come highly recommended.
We know a few of the same people.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd love to start out, before we get into how to conceive, write, and publish your next big idea. As far as what you've done in the authorship world, what's your story? I mean, were you always just natural at writing from a young age? Is it something you got hit at a certain point when you had another job or business and said, oh, I want to start writing a bunch of books? What's your story in the authorship world?
Yeah, I mean, I know people, I know writers. I have writers in my program who say, I knew at the age of 7, I wanted to be a writer. That is not me. I did not know that. But there was never really a point where I said, I'm going to be a writer. I just kind of backed into it. I mean, I started out in life as a cellist, as a concert cellist, as a composer. I started out high school. When I was in high school, I actually dropped out of high school and started my own high school. I drove cab. I was a business person. I was in sales. I did all kinds of things. But everything that I did, I always seemed to be the guy who was tapped to write the newsletter or the article or to edit the thing, the brochure. And I guess I come by it, honestly. My parents were both in academia, so I fell in love with writing 25 years ago, and all of the career I've had, I've published 40 books. That's all been mostly since the age of 50. So I'm like a second half of the century guy.
What got you writing the first book?
The very first book I wrote was called You Call the Shots. And it was a memoir, business memoir of a 19-year-old wunderkind, this guy who I had interviewed for a magazine I started. And he had started a dozen businesses by the time he left high school, made $1 million by the time he left high school. Great kid, amazing kid, incredible story, Cameron Johnson. And I approached him and said, dude, your story should be a book. So I did the first partnership of dozens that I've done since then, where basically somebody else has a story, I sit down with them, I partner with them, and I end up writing it, kind of a ghostwriting thing. And then that kind of evolved into co-writing, where two of us, like Bob Burg and I, would get together, combine our ideas, our inspiration, and create a book together. Most of the books I've done have been partnerships, although some have been solo. And yeah, I have a lot of interest in a lot of different subjects.
Well, 40 plus subjects, apparently. When it comes to someone having a big idea in the conception phase, where do they start? Is it starting by journaling? Where do they start knowing where they want to end up doing something? Even a tenth of what you've done would be amazing. Where does that start in the conceive phase of a big idea and getting it out of your system, if you will?
It's hard to answer that question. Like, it's the where do your ideas come from question that I think baffles most writers. And it's one of the first questions that people ask. And I think it baffles them because honestly, a lot of writers don't know where their ideas come from, but I can tell you what they feel like and what they look like. Every book starts with a concept. And the word concept means to get something pregnant, means to get pregnant.
I did not know that.
The word conceive. And a concept is when really what the anatomy of a concept is, of a great concept, is when two dissimilar or even opposite things or unrelated things smash together, kind of like atomic fusion. That's what a conception is, a sperm and an egg, right? Kaboom, conceive. And so, for example, a kid goes to boarding school is not a concept. It's a thought. It's been done. Charles Dickens did it 1,000 times. It's like, but a kid goes to wizard school, that's Harry Potter, right? A serial killer on the loose. This is not a concept. This is like, yeah, it's an ingredient. A serial killer on an aircraft carrier. That became my first novel, Steel Fear. It's being made into a TV series now. That was a great concept. I give all credit to my partner, Brandon Webb, who's a Navy SEAL. He had that concept idea because he experienced something related to that. That's what a great concept is. You take the same thing for entrepreneurs, not just writers. Any concept for a great business is you taking two things that nobody ever thought of combining before and smashing them together. Give you a great example. The novel, The Chain. The novelist Adrian McKinty had written dozens of great novels, but he hadn't gotten a lot of acclaim. He had this idea for a novel, which is your kid is kidnapped. Okay, your kid is kidnapped. It's exciting, right? But we've seen it 1,000 times. He combined your kid is kidnapped with chain letter. Like, your kid has been kidnapped. If you want to get them back, if you want to see them alive again, you have to go kidnap somebody else's kid and show proof of life, and then we'll get your kid back. It's like, holy cow. Don Winslow called it Jaws for parents. It was a terrifying concept. And the book just blew the socks off everybody. It was one of the best-selling books of 2017. It was huge success. That's what a great idea is. That's what a great concept is. Two things that never went together before, smash them together, and boom, you get an explosion.
So how do you add, talk a little bit more about that. How do you add creativity into it, or how do you know when to say, oh, I'm going to move on? I just have a general idea that's not good enough. What is there creative process, or how do you further know, okay, I have a concept, not just an idea?
You know, I think it depends on your temperament and how you like to work. And I don't know if we're talking about being a writer or being an entrepreneur, because like I said, they're both similar impulses. I've been an entrepreneur and I've been a writer, and they're very similar experiences, because, you know, every writer is an entrepreneur. Basically, you're creating something that didn't exist before and trying to get the world interested in it and seeing if the world wants to bite. So how do you pursue that? You know, one way of doing that is to play with it yourself, tinker with it. As a writer, you play with it, develop it, see where it goes. Another way, though, is to bounce it off a good sounding board. You know, try your idea out on people close to you who are going to tell you the truth of what they think. Entrepreneurs know this really well. They know that when you get a great idea for a business, you got to bounce it off somebody and see. A great idea will make people go, oh, I want to know more about that. Or, oh, you got to do that. A so-so concept will land with a thud. Not only land with other people, but land with yourself too. A great concept has kind of a crackle to it. You can almost feel it. The thing is, I don't entirely trust myself. So I try ideas out on myself, but I also like to try ideas out on my wife and on a couple of my best friends, people who know books and can tell me, yeah, that's got snap, crackle, and pop, man. You got to do that.
So once you get a good concept based on what you just said, and I love the parallel of writers and entrepreneurs, because that's both people who will be listening.
Yes.
What comes after? Okay, I've got the concept. I've bounced it off people. I love the idea. They love the idea. It's a concept here. What comes next for writers and entrepreneurs after, okay, I've got it. What do I do now?
Okay, so it comes down to a single word, which I'll get to in 1 second. But let me use the example of The Go-Giver. This is the book that I'm probably best known for, simply because it's had the most exposure and most readers. Bob Burg, my buddy Bob Burg, came to me with an idea, a concept. It was just, I credit Bob totally. It's his concept, which was basically, you know, you could say, it's good to be a giving person. Yawn, right? That is not a book. That's like a homily. That's half a homily on Sunday morning, right? But being a giving person can make you stupendously successful. Whoa, what? There's a cognitive dissonance there, the same way there is for, you know, for any great concept. And Bob had this idea about a book, instead of being a go-getter, being a go-giver. And he had an idea for the start of a little parable about that. So cool idea, got a concept, excellent concept, ready to go. What do you do with that, as you ask? The recipe for a successful book, the successful book equation, is three things: a compelling concept, a great concept, expert execution, and radical exposure. Now we'll talk about all three. We got great concept. Next, you need expert execution. And the word it comes down to is excellence. It's just excellence. Like you have an idea for a business, the execution of that has to be first class for the concept to get a fair test. It's the same with writing a book. Bob and I put together some ideas for the book. I started doodling on my computer. I drafted a few chapters. I sent it off to him. He loved it. He thought, cool, keep going. I kept going. In 6 weeks' time, Mark, we had this thing kind of fleshed out. We had a manuscript. We got it to an agent that I knew through a friend of a friend who took it to New York, who shared it with publishers, and they all said not interested. We got 22 no's. And you know what? They were right. You know, the moral of a story like this, like the chicken soup for the soul story or the Kentucky Fried Chicken story, everyone's heard these stories where the inventor had to be persistent and get no after no after no after no after no until somebody finally said yes. And you think that the moral of the story is keep knocking on doors. That is not the moral of the story. The moral of the story is those editors were all right to say no because the execution wasn't excellent. The story wasn't excellent. Concept, brilliant. It wasn't excellent yet. So I took the manuscript back and actually worked on it for a year, revised and revised and revised and revised. It was kind of a graduate class in rewriting. It is like, you know, the first space flights. How many rockets crashed, right? Concept, great. Execution, not there yet. So I think that this is the big challenge for self-published books. A lot of self-published books, self-publishing is a huge market. You know, 3/4 of the ebooks out there are self-published. 4 million new titles every year, and a huge proportion are self-published. And 95% of those are kind of and land with a thud, and nobody buys them because they weren't ready. It's not excellent execution. The thing about going with a traditional publisher is they kind of demand excellent execution. So you have to go through hoops. When you self-publish, hey, you're the boss. And if it's kind of mediocre, you say, hey, I love it. You know, my baby is so pretty. Everybody
That's what I was thinking of. My baby's cute. Don't tell me otherwise.
It's the prettiest baby ever made. Well, maybe so, but maybe you need to clean it up and get the goop out of its hair. And so it's excellence. It boils down to, you know, excellence, whatever. And excellence isn't something that you're born into. It's something you learn. It's a craft. With entrepreneur, it's the same thing. Business excellence, how to craft a business so that it's excellent. The phone presentation, the brochure, the website, the storefront, the office, whatever the elements of your particular business are, the manufacture, the design, they have to withstand the test of excellence. And, you know, that's what my whole coaching program is about, is helping people take an idea through the craft of writing, which is not easy, but it's doable. It's learnable. The thing is, you can't just throw it on paper and say, hey, it's authentic. It's me. We hope it'll sell. Because there's 4 million titles being published every year. The average American reads 4 books a year, which means your new book has literally a 1 in a million chance for any particular American to pick it up and read it. To beat those odds, the execution has to be really excellent. And finally, you need radical exposure. You need to get it in front of people, in front of the right people.
Could you explain excellent execution a little further? What do you mean? I get that excellence as a whole, but is there a certain bullet points or steps to take? Is it, what do you do with your students in your class? How do you create that excellence?
Yeah. I have a set of mantras, writer's mantras that I teach people, and one of them is write drunk, edit sober. And I have some people in recovery in my course. I don't mean literally. You don't actually get cocktails going, but the idea is when you write, it's like you're supposed to believe that what you're putting on paper is the best thing ever written. It's like, it's amazing. All the stuff we've heard leadership people tell us for years, personal development people tell us for years, like nobody knows, nobody understands what your dream is better than you do. Do what you love and the money will follow. Follow your heart. Do all that stuff. Be invincible. I say you have to write with the arrogance of a teenager, but then edit with the humility of a monk. And here's the deal. Those are two completely different mindsets. You cannot edit your stuff while you're writing it because it's like stepping on the accelerator and the brakes at the same time. You have to write with the I can do no wrong arrogance of inspiration. It's like, just throw ideas down, doesn't matter what shape they're in. Then you need to separate from that, come back to it a day later, a week later, whatever it is, enough time to get emotional distance and look at it objectively and say, most of this is garbage. There are some good ideas in here. You have to become familiar with the brutality of self-revision. And that, my friends, is a skill. It's not something you're born with. It takes a little humility, but it takes skill. We do have a thing called rewrite labs. We'll take somebody's writing and actually put it up on the screen in Zoom, and I'll rewrite it real time. That's where excellence comes from. But the problem is what most people do when they try to write is they start writing, and the moment they got something on paper, like a paragraph, a sentence, they start tinkering with it and editing it and improving it. You can't improve while you write. It's like working on your car while you're driving down the highway at 60 miles an hour. That doesn't really work. You're going to go get it up in the lift later to work on it. Right now you're driving. Don't crash. So just write. Get in there and write. You can do no wrong. Later, you're going to revise and rewrite and learn those skill sets.
Well, for the revision and the rewriting, do you recommend that people if they possibly can? I mean, there's so many sites out there where you can find freelancers. Do you recommend they have somebody else do it as a general rule, or where does that stand as far as your advice? You can do your own rewriting, or you should have someone else at least put an eye on the editing.
Yeah.
Where do you stand?
Yeah. Stephen King says he learned his first major lesson about writing from his boss at the local newspaper where he was in school. He was at his first job. And the lesson was, you write your first draft with the door closed and the second draft with the door open. And what that means is when you're writing yourself, don't show it to anybody. When you're writing your draft, the same thing could be true for an entrepreneur. When you're conceiving of your business, don't get any input, don't get any ideas, don't get any perspective. Just stay in your bubble, because that's where inspiration and creativity ferments. Once you've got it kind of set on the plate, which in the writer's case is the first draft, then open the door and let in trusted judgment of a handful of people that you trust. To answer your question, I think you need both. I think you need to learn the rewrite skills yourself, take it as far as you can, and then once you've taken it as far as you can yourself, put it in a drawer for a week and then hand it to an editor, to somebody who's actually a pro, and get their, if not their complete reworking, at least get it what they call a manuscript assessment, which is let them tell you. A good editor will always tell you first what's great, and then tell you what sucks and what has to go and what you have to throw out, what you have to rewrite, and what it needs. It's kind of like how you are with your kids. You always want to start by telling them how great they are, and then say, when you hit your sister, I think you could have handled that better. But first, you got to tell them how great they are, right? That's what a good editor will do, because when you write, you're bearing your soul and you're very vulnerable. Everybody is. It's the nature of the beast. But I think, to answer your question, I think you need to practice the skills on your own writing. And, and part of the way you do that is reading great stuff in the same genre that you want to write in.
So when you get the product edited and in a more digestible format, could you navigate some of the publishing waters that you've gone through with New York, getting all those rejections? Do you recommend people, if they can, go to a traditional publisher, or it doesn't matter if you go traditional or hybrid? We know you just mentioned self-publishing, but traditional, hybrid, what do you recommend people do ideally in an ideal situation if they can?
Right. So there's really two paths. There's self-publishing and there's traditional. And you mentioned hybrid. Hybrid is sort of neither one. Hybrid, people say it's really a combination of both. It's actually a combination of neither kind of. When hybrid is actually your self-publishing. I am not a huge fan of hybrids. They used to be called vanity press. I don't recommend hybrids in most situations. In some situations, a hybrid publisher, so-called, can be an effective path. It's going to cost a lot of money, and you got to have a really clear idea of what you're doing. But in most cases, you want to go either traditional publisher or self-publish. And which one's better? They're sort of apples and oranges. They can both work. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. A lot of people think, well, self-publishing is going to be easier. Like, I don't know if I can, cut that hurdle, jump through all those hoops for traditional. Self-publishing is going to be easier. Well, maybe. It's easier to produce something that's kind of crappy when you self-publish, but to produce a book you're proud of, it's not actually any harder either way. Ease of use is not the criterion here. Often people are told you'll make a lot more money if you self-publish. Yeah, not necessarily. That is actually not really true. It can be if you sell them out of the back of your van or in the back of the lecture hall, you'll make more. But if you really want to sell any number, it's not necessarily true. So let's describe the two paths real quickly. If you're going to go traditional, then really typically you need an agent. You can't go approach one of the so-called big five publishers, Penguin, Hachette, Harper, and so on. You can't go to them and say, hey, you want to buy my book? You need an agent. Is an agent worth it? Absolutely. What an agent does, an agent knows not only all the companies, but all the individual acquisition editors and the people on the staff and what they're looking for and what they've done in the past. And they know the ropes. They will help you since they get a percentage. They're highly motivated for your book to do well. They will put you in front of the best possibly designed situation, best people to be likely to get to take your book, to want to work with your book. When you self-publish, you don't need an agent. You just publish yourself. I think the biggest advantages of going with a publisher are that a good publisher will completely handle the cost of production. You don't pay anything with a real publisher. You don't pay a penny. They take care of all the cost. They take care of all the responsibility of production, the cover, the printing, the interior design of the book, etc., getting it, out to the world, distribution. And they will also market the book to the trade, which means to bookstore chains, to reviewers like Publishers Weekly or Kirkus Reviews or people like this, and to libraries. Those are very difficult to get in yourself. When you self-publish, it's very difficult to market to the book chains or the libraries or the professional reviewers. So you kind of lose that if you self-publish. What you gain when you self-publish is a certain amount of control, like creative control, the cover, the design, the title, it's all up to you, right? Control of pricing, which can be a very important thing because if you want to, do a 1-week sale or a weekend sale or a 1-day blitz sale, flash sale, and these can be really, really effective ways to market your books. You're the boss. You can drop the price however you want. You can revise it and put a new one out whenever you want. There's a lot of control there. And so that's very attractive to people. But, either path are highly workable.
For a first-time author, what do traditional publishers want to see? Is there certain social media metrics, mailing lists? What do they want to see or expect to see that people should know about before, going through the trouble of getting an agent, banking on a traditional publisher? Do they have checklists of expectations?
They do. Absolutely. And it's a little hard to know exactly. It's kind of like trying to understand the Colonel's fried chicken recipe. It's hard to know exactly what it is. I'll tell you what everybody says it is. Is that publishers are looking for your platform. The truism, and that word means something that isn't really true, by the way. The truism, the line is that if you're writing fiction, what counts is the quality of the fiction. That's all that matters, is the manuscript. If you're writing nonfiction, like a how-to book, a memoir, and so on, then what matters is your platform, which means how many readers can you, the author, reach? How many books can you sell? If you're a celebrity, if you're Oprah Winfrey or you're Donald Trump or you're whoever, then you got a platform, right? You have a lot of recognition in the world. If you're a teacher or a marketer and you have a lot of people, coming to your workshops, if you have multiple speaking engagements a year, if you have a way of reaching large numbers of people who have already shown an interest in your stuff, that's what publishers like to see. The truth is even if it's fiction, publishers want to see that too. The market is more and more and more competitive. So one thing they want to see is, do you have a following? Do you have a reach? Do you have a popular website? Do you have, you asked about social media. Publishers, for some reason, are impressed by big social media followings. I don't really understand why that is, because the truth is a big social media following doesn't mean you're going to sell books.
Nope.
Because following doesn't mean engagement. What matters is a highly engaged audience. Like if you have 1,000 people who are really engaged with your newsletter or your monthly musings or whatever it is, that's worth more than 50,000 followers on Twitter who just like flick through their phones and they're never going to buy anything. You're not going to buy your book. I work with guys with 1 million followers, and they don't sell any books. It doesn't. So social media following isn't as much of an asset as it sounds like. What is an asset is engaged mailing lists. Your email list is the very, very best marketing asset you have as an author. If you have any kind of public persona or public podium or stage, if you give talks, if you do classes, anything like that, that's hugely valuable as well. So one of the first things you can do as an author, even before you have a book done, is start building that platform, building it. It doesn't have to be huge, but it has to be active. And you have to show, a publisher wants to see that you, the author, are going to be an entrepreneur and intimately involved and engaged in the process of finding your readers, finding your readership, and getting your book out there.
So what kind of tips do you have? I love that. As far as even before the book comes out, I know I've been involved with book tours before, and I would have people reach out to me afterwards. They hear about a successful one. They're like, oh, do that for me. By the way, my book comes out next week. It's like, that's not really how it works. Could you explain how to start building a following, or maybe it's what you did or people in your class do? How can you start, and what should you do before you publish the book and not wait until the week of, literally sometimes the week or month of publication? What can you do ahead of time?
Yeah, I'll go to two places with that. The first is that a lot of the things that you can do when the book launches, like you mentioned, book tour. A physical book tour can be really valuable because you get out face to face with people, and it may seem like it's not nearly as effective to get face to face with 15 people as it is to send a tweet out to 150,000. But actually, the store face to face is more powerful. Book tours are particularly powerful when they're local, unless you're really well known, and then national can be fine. But it's a lot of effort, and it's not typically a huge amount of return. A podcast tour is virtual. You don't have to leave your house. It's a lot easier. You can reach a lot more people, but it's not as powerful as meeting face to face. Trade-offs, but they're both great to do. But here's my point. You got to lay the foundation for those months ahead of time. You got to be making your list of podcast hosts and reaching out to them and contacting them, 6 months ahead of time, if not more. A lot of the bigger podcasts schedule like 8-9 months ahead. Same thing with book tours. If you want to go to bookstores, you have to build a relationship with those bookstores, and it is a relationship, not just a cold call. And so that is something you want to be doing months and months ahead of time. However, there is none of these promotional efforts, book tours, podcast tours, interviews, media, whatever, none of that, or your launch event in your hometown, none of that holds a candle to the real marketing powerhouse for an author, which is your email list. Building your email, authors universally know that building your email list and engaging with it is the single most powerful thing you can do to create a powerful book launch. And you've got to be doing it way ahead of time. Certainly 6 months, better a year. And, it's like you start to build that list. You get some kind of regular communication out to people that connects with them authentically and personally and meaningfully, gives them value, whether it's monthly or weekly or fortnightly or whatever it is that works for you. And you keep them engaged. Then when it comes time for your book launch, they're already there. They're your people. And that's really the number one marketing asset that you have as an author. And anybody can build that. You don't have to be famous.
Well, you mentioned podcast tours. I'd like to go back to that a little bit.
Yes.
I know I've experienced some of the more experienced guests have one-pagers. that they send you with tips, tricks, things like that. If someone is listening or watching and they realize, oh, I do want to be a more podcast. Is there a recipe for the one pager? I mean, what should you be bragging about? What should be on that is to make you a attractive podcast guest?
I mean, it kind of depends upon what you have that you can load onto that page. But I agree, having a one page is a great thing. What you need to start reaching out to podcast hosts, which I highly recommend, is you need a great photo, a really good photo. Make sure you go to the effort to have the photo done. If it isn't done professionally, make it look professional. Go to the effort to get a good professional author photo. Write a great author bio. In fact, you probably need to create at least 3, a medium-sized one, a really short one that's like 25, 30 words, and a fairly longer one that's maybe 70, 80, 90, 100 words. Because people have different requirements, but you need to have a set of bios that kind of give the highlights of your accomplishments, especially as related to your book, and also something personal, something interesting about you. For some reason, when I send out bios, I don't think I did it with you, Mark. I don't think I put this in my bio. I think I was being too short, but I usually put in my bios that when I was in high school, I dropped out and started my own high school, and then later went back there as a teacher. And I can go through, New York Times bestseller and book awards and, Go Giver selling over 1 million copies and all this other stuff. And people go, yeah. Tell me about the high school thing. That's what they want to know. Like,
yep.
Wait, you started your own high school when you were a teenager? How does that work? It's got nothing to do with my book, but that's what people, so anything kind of interesting, quirky, fascinating, unusual about you, you can get it in that bio as a talking point. Podcast hosts are looking for talking points, something engaging and interesting about you. And then I also, as you said, like to have a one page, which has your picture, it has the book cover, if the book cover is done, kind of a quick summary of the book, like the high points, the talking points of the book. Remember that what you're creating is a tool for the benefit of the podcast host. You're doing them a favor. You're trying to make their job easier. You're giving them material that makes it easier for them. A lot of podcast hosts are way too busy to prepare far in advance. And if you give them kind of the whole story in little bite-sized pieces, they will be so grateful. And you don't want it to be longer than a page. You're absolutely right.
So with what you've done with the Go Giver and other books, I love the start to close it up a little bit with, okay, your book comes out, it sells whatever amount that it sells. What do you do to increase the longevity of your book, if you will? Because I know some people put it out, they do their big, the 72-hour sale, friends and family buy it the same hour on Amazon, they get the blue sticker, poof, I'm a bestseller. Okay, bye-bye, I'm gone. Yeah. What would you suggest people do after publishing a book to keep it, the right word I found is relevant on an ongoing basis and not just be a flash in the pan, up, spike, done? Yeah. Actually, it's pretty simple. It is one simple thing you can do, and that is make sure that you've co-authored with Bob Burg. Let's say we could just call Bob up. Why not? Hey, just call him. He'll answer. No, I mean, Bob has been an animal about, he's wrapped his whole professional life around that book, The Go Giver, and he's just done talk after talk after talk after talk. And he's on social media every morning. Every time anybody anywhere on the planet mentions Go Giver, Bob is there within 60 minutes answering, saying, thank you so much. I so appreciate that. That means so much to me. He's just an animal on social media. I can't do that. It's not my temperament. I'm busy writing. So I do my best to keep up. But yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of books they come out, there's launch week, and then they kind of go kaboom. And I am always going for the long haul, what they call the long tail, I guess. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the Living Now Book Award, the Evergreen Medal that Go Giver got. We got that medal, I think, in 2017 or 2018, a decade after the book came out. We won this award for positive impact on global change. But that's because the book came out, it did really well right away, but then it kept doing well. And that's really unusual for a book, and it's every author's dream. I've got a handful of books. Most have not done that. Most of my books have not been evergreen like that, but a handful have. I think that part of it is the design of the book itself. There are books that, by their nature, tend to be forever books. A book like The Alchemist, right? Oh, yeah. Or Rich Dad Poor Dad, or there are books that kind of have this. You know that you're going to be picking this up in 20 years and recommending it to somebody.
And so books that are much more timely and topical, they may come and go more easily. So part of it is the design of the book, but a lot of it is establishing a connection with your readership and fostering that connection. This is what Bob does in social media. He really connects with the readers of the book. And he, of course, he does it also through giving professional talks, traveling to cities and giving talks there, giving Go-Giver-based seminars and workshops and so forth. But really, if you traditionally publish, your publisher may do a lot, may do a little, but they will do something to help market your book. That help will almost always come to an end a month after your book is out, because they got to move on to the next book. They're busy and you're done, man. That isn't completely true. And I'm working with a small publisher right now that has astonished me by a year later, 2 years later, they're actively engaged in us still, which is great. It's very unusual. But mostly you as the author, it's up to you to keep the book alive. And I think it's really important to do. You mentioned the blue sticker and the Amazon. A lot of people put tremendous energy into achieving the status of Amazon bestseller, but Amazon bestseller doesn't actually mean that much. It doesn't mean anything in terms of money. It doesn't really mean anything in terms of impact, because it could be that 14 people bought your book and it happened in that subcategory of a category of a subcategory. That 1 hour, you happen to get to the top of that tiny list because 14 people bought it during that 60-minute period. Big deal.
Exactly.
The only thing it really does is it gives you bragging rights. And to me, the bragging rights are hollow. I never put Amazon bestseller on any of my books because it's not that meaningful. What is meaningful? You have to decide what's meaningful for your book. There are books I know, friends of mine who've written books that have never sold more than 1,000 copies, but it has had a huge impact on their life and their community and their family and their friends and their life. And that's awesome. To me, what is more meaningful than the number of book sales is the number of reader reviews on Amazon, because that's impact. I mean, I get to see people are actually reading it and it's making a difference for them. I mean, you need to decide what your metric for success is with the book. But beyond the month or two of the launch of the book, it's really up to you to create an ongoing sort of support system for that book, so that you're continually in contact with the people who are your readers and they become your ambassadors because of it.
This is a big part of that mailing list you were talking about. I mean, is it mostly the mailing list you said so far, and Bob on social media? Are there other ways to stay relevant and keep things going, or is it the mailing list and social media is the bulk of it?
I mean, there are some books that are that lend themselves to being series. And, for example, fiction, obviously, if you're writing like crime novels, like my 3 thrillers, I have a series of 3 thrillers, the Chief Finn thrillers, Steel Fear, Cold Fear, Blind Fear. There are other fears in the future. It's being made for a TV show now, as I mentioned. When you have a series, then your people start looking forward to the next one. The Go-Giver has a whole series of books out. The most recent was The Go-Giver Marriage, which my wife and I wrote. And so people who know the Go-Giver, anticipate that. But you can't make every book into a series. But you can cultivate your readership and keep in touch with them and engage them, and they'll be looking for your next book, whatever it is, series or not. So that is, and when people buy your 3rd book and they love it, if they haven't read your first 2 books, they're going to go back and read them. That's called backlist. So the best way you can keep old books alive is to put out new books, promote them, and have your backlist in that book and have it very alive on your website. Then, as you say, mailing list, engagement with your readers is great. All the ways that you originally promote your book, you can find ways to continue to do that on some scale. Keep it alive, keep it alive, keep it alive. Obviously, if you can do any kind of teaching or workshop or counseling or coaching based on your book or related to your book, that helps to keep the book alive. Yeah.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. When it comes to authorship, with everything we were talking about, if you were to tell people, above all, if you're going to do, if nothing else, at least do this one thing. Just do this one thing the right way. What would you, of all of that, what would you say is top of mind? Is just at least do this. What would you tell them to do?
if you want to write a book, if you got an idea for a book in your head, or even part of an idea, you're not sure what the whole electric equation is yet, but you've got a germ of an idea. You want to write a book. You have an idea what it is. Go to your favorite bookstore physically, not Amazon. Go to your favorite, walk into the building, your favorite bookstore, find the shelf where your book is going to sit. Find the specific spot on the shelf where your book, find the alphabetical by author, find where your book is going to sit. Then on that shelf, that genre, that category, pick out at least 6 books that you admire or that you want to read and narrow it down to 3. Get 3 books, walk out of the store with those 3 physical books. I don't care if you're reading Kindle, walk out of the store with those 3 physical books, go buy them, don't steal them, and take them home, read them all cover to cover, and then read them again and ask yourself, how did they do that? How did he do that? How did she do that? What makes it so powerful? What makes it so moving? That bookshelf in that store is your new home. That's where you're going to find your readership, your people. That's where your people are. And you need to find your people to be a successful author. Those 3 books, they are your Bible. You'll read them at least 2 times, probably 3, maybe 4. You need at least 3 to triangulate. So you're not just copying one author, 3 different authors, by the way, not 3 of the same author. And so you need at least 3 to triangulate you and put you in that space where you are in that genre, you are in that mindset, but your concept is original and it's just you. And that's the best way you can set yourself up for success.
Thank you so much, John. If people want to find you online, where can they go?
My website is johndavidmann.com. That's just my name. And the workshop, my program is at 7authoressentials.com. The number 7, the word 7 doesn't matter. 7authoressentials.com.
Excellent. And for everyone, John David Mann, that's John David Mann to get to the right website. We don't know who owns the other one.
That's right.
Get to that one. Thank you again, John. I appreciate it.
Hey, Mark, thank you so much. It's been a blast.
And